If you had seen this Aberrus boss from 10.1, you would think he belongs more to the Icecrown Citadel than he does to the Dragon Isles. Then we have these pale, very undead looking Draktyr. We have the origins of Shadowflame, and we know it was used in the past to raise skeletons. Then there are the Rotinols that mysteriously appeared on the Dragon Isles, and this decay magic that has been corrupting Titan Leylines. All of this is of course super relevant to Galakrond, and we know that Galakrond was created to the interference of Yogg-Saron, also known as Yogg-Saron, the god of death, and Galakrond might just have been the very first undead on Azeroth. With these experiments, it is pretty evident that Eltharion has literally been raising undead in Aberrus, both Draconid and Dragons. Seeing that he knows every single part of the earth as the earth aspect, could it be possible that he also weaponized the fallen brother of Alexstrasza and Ysera, Dralad, that was quite recently mentioned in Tyr's laboratory? Could Eltharion have been the Proto-Lich King, and why has he been raising the undead? Right now, Gamivo has some amazing sales, which you can check out with my link in the description. You can get The Witcher, anything Warcraft related, gift cards, and a bunch of games at really amazing prices. Best of all, if you use my code DORON, you can add an additional discount as well. So make sure to click my link in the description and check out Gamivo and get some really great deals. If you have been following the lore since the Dragonflight Alpha, you might have noticed this trend pretty much since the start, and it has only been getting more and more significant. Right around the release of the expansion, we got an updated Northrend book that sort of in a halfway confirmed that Yogg-Saron is still present, and with the recent lore, I'm pretty sure the old gods can't even be killed. I mean, Blizzard in an interview literally told us, sort of between the lines, this was not like an official confirmation, that death is not really a thing old gods experience, or that it works for them the way it works for us, and this is pretty evident with the fact that we have gone through the Shadowlands. Then from the documents, we got confirmations that it was Yogg-Saron that corrupted the waters and created Galakrond, and all of that is of course connected to decay magic, which I feel like is going to be super relevant any moment now. As you may already know, Galakrond was, as far as we know, the very first sort of undead on Azeroth. Not really himself, but the dragons he created were called the Unliving, and he was infested with this rotting curse, which was super close to something that would happen to the Scourge. It was really the Scourge before the Scourge. Now, a lot of people, when they hear about an undead, they immediately think about the Lich King, the Forsaken, the recent happening with the Shadowlands. However, we know, for example, that completely independent undead had existed on Azeroth many years prior, as is the case with Metal Fellstorm, who may just be the oldest undead that we know of, apart from these unliving dragons. Now, the exact mechanism of this death curse of Galakrond has never been fully clear, but it is almost certainly tied to decay magic. What further supports this, and I'm pretty sure all of you had seen this that have leveled the character to the Dragon Isles, and those are the rotting decay magic gnolls. Now, the gnolls themselves are pretty relevant to this conversation. The Tuskars said they have always been a threat, but not as crazy as they were now, as they had stumbled onto this decay magic that suddenly, mysteriously, all of a sudden appeared. What is actually interesting is that this decay magic is not here to corrupt the Gnoll tribe, but we had actually seen it corrupting and nearly destroying ley lines. The Gnoll power just seems to be part of the collateral damage. As you know, ley lines are powerful arcane sources of magic, and as you know, arcane is pretty much the lifeblood of Order and the Titans. So naturally, something has been eating at it, and just around the time when everyone and their mother is looking to overthrow the Titan Order, I don't know, seems a tad bit suspicious. The Rotinols that fell under this influence could almost be classified as undead. They may not be the Lich King Scourge undead, but they're definitely closer to that side of the spectrum than they are to the living. Now, the reason I'm making this video is due to what we are actually discovering in 10.1, as the plot only thickens and Aberrus, an Eltharion secret laboratory, has been discovered. So it is pretty obvious at this point already that the entire focus of 10.1 is going to be on Shadowflame magic. Shadowflame is this super potent, super powerful magic that Eltharion had conjured himself by sacrificing elementals and using old god and void powers. We had known about this magic because we had seen the descendants of Deathwing using them, such as Nefarian, but I'd say he only tried to revive what his father had originated in Aberrus in the Zarala Caverns all those thousands of years ago. Now, Shadowflame is super potent. It seems to be a mix of elemental, natural power of the planet and the old god magics. However, in my opinion, I think the most important spirit of nature that Eltharion used was decay, and this is the most potent source, and we already have a bunch of proof of it. First of all, we had seen the presence of Shadow Flame with Nefarian, and it had actual necromantic properties. Like, this is not some sort of a speculation. There were quite literally skeletons that were raised, known as animated bone warriors. However, now we had dug out a few NPCs from Aberrus and 10.1 and some of the discarded experiments, and if you can see this initially and I told you this was going to be a boss in the Icecrown Citadel, you would probably believe me if you didn't know anything about Dragonflight and the Dragon Isles. First of all, there is this sort of random voidy Draktyr NPC. He obviously looks void infused with his eyes and hands, however his complexion is more undead than that of a Forsaken. He's completely pale, there are veins everywhere, and he's literally missing flesh and skin on parts of his body. To be fair, I could totally see this being a parallel to the pale orcs from Draenor that could tie in to more pure void and undeath, because pale orcs were almost undead-like, and they really would be twins to this new Draktyr that we discovered, and we know the pale orcs were essentially destroyed by the void. However, this is only the beginning of the stuff we had started to dig out. We had one of the bosses from Aberrus known as the Experimentation of the Draktyr that are essentially a bunch of failed experiments, and here is the actual official boss fight description. On the road to develop the Draktyr, there were many failures. Some of these early versions were too volatile to destroy it and instead kept dormant to protect the world from their brutality. Now, they awakened to test their prowess against the champions of Azeroth. If you can add the boss fights, there are a few of these guys will face, and Riontius, for example, is definitely a void experiment. He's completely purple, he has marks of the void everywhere. However, this guy, Tadrian, is literally undeath itself. This is obviously a Draconid that Neltharion had experimented upon, but the guy literally looks like one of Lich King's experiments. I mean, he has missing skin, his bone structure seems to be completely twisted and all over the place. You can actually see the muscles on his arm. Even more importantly, the guy literally has a skull you can see through, and his head is more skeleton than it is actually Draconid. Now, obviously, this is not a Scourge, Shadowlands are dead, he has pretty apparent Void, Shadow Flame hue to him, but it seriously seems like Neltharion has been raising Draconids into undead. When you combine this with the fact that Blizzard confirmed Shadow Flame can raise undead, it's pretty obvious that these are in fact some version of the undead. As we went through Shadowlands, we learned that there is a lot more to death than we had known previously, and the cosmological forces all have their own versions of the afterlives, and it is really just not so black and white as we had previously believed. We know for a fact that Neltharion has been using Void together with the elementals of Azeroth, and as we know, Spirit is one of the natural elements, and through it, the exact opposite Decay, which we know is connected to Galakrond and Yogg-Saron. I mean, keep in mind, the name of Yogg-Saron is quite literally the god of death, and Galakrond was his creation, and he was creating unliving dragons. I feel like aside from maybe Azeroth, like the real deep secret of Neltharion and what he's been doing in Aberrus isn't the super powerful fighter enhanced spells, but the fact that he has been either experimenting with Galakrond himself or the magics that was consumed by Galakrond that no one knew anything thus far. At the moment, we have a trail of undead as we follow his footsteps. Another really interesting hint is that we know about Rallet, the undead brother of Alexstrasza and Ysera that was just so mysteriously mentioned in the halls of Tyr in the questline. We know he was a victim to Galakrond, his body had gone missing, so he was probably turned into an undead. Now, what if this guy had ended up turned into one of Deathwing's crazy undead experiments? I mean, there's so many of these experiments that he had created, and he's been not so nice to dragons whatsoever, as you can see from all these boss fights. I mean, keep in mind, the guy has a gigantic citadel in a cavern, and he knows every nook and cranny of the earth, so he might have dug him up somewhere, as Rallet was not just a regular dragon, but a brother to the aspect, so he was probably a lot more potent than your regular proto-drake or just a black dragon. Seeing that he raised actual dragons, he infused kill dragons with Elementium plates, I really don't think Rallet might have been off the menu, and this could now be a really personal and painful secret that the Primal Incarnates could weaponize against both Ysera and Alexstrasza that could be incredibly relevant to the storyline. Regardless, there are definitely a lot of hints of undeath already in Dragonflight, and I'm pretty sure we're going to discover even more as we go to 10.1. Thank you for watching. Check out Did Iridikron Make a Bargain with a Light by clicking on the screen, and check out Norod's Academy for videos on real world history. See you next time.